For over 1,200 years, people have walked Spain's ancient pilgrimage path, the Way of St. James, or the Camino de Santiago. I've wanted to walk the way ever since I saw the film. I thought it would take me away from my normal life and give me time to connect with my intuition from God. My journey lasted 45 days. I walked, I saw many villages, I met many new friends. These were the symbols that marked the way. I found my way to Santiago, received my Compostela, and along the way, I heard these words, Buen Camino. I walked the French route of the Camino. My Camino began in Pamplona and walking all the way to Santiago, a mere 754 kilometers or 468.5 miles. No wonder I had to burn my boots at the end. They were worn out. My journey began flying to Madrid, then busing to Pamplona, and staying one night in a hostel in Pamplona. I was so excited to see my first sign, the many signs that marked the way, the trail. I walked through small towns or villages, Cizur Menor and Zurich. This is the village where I stopped to have lunch, a giant bocadilla. I ate half of it for lunch, half for dinner. I bought my Camino shell, and now I'm wearing it as a true pilgrim. And although I walked alone this day, and it was raining, I enjoyed the stunning views and the Alto del Pardon, the wrought iron representation of medieval pilgrims, heads bent to the west wind. I continued to walk alone, and then I came across a Virgin Mary statue as I made my way into the next village. I wanted to spend the night in this village, but I was too late. It was only 5:30 and they had no beds, so I continued to the next village, Maruzabal, and stayed at this albergue. It was a home converted for pilgrims, with bunk beds and utilities to wash clothes and enjoy each other's company. I got up early the next morning due to the other pilgrims and looked for the signs and walked my way into the next village, Obaños, and then walked further, finding more signs, guiding my way to Puente la Reina, where I saw my first Monumento al Peregrino. The villages were always marked by their bell towers and their cathedrals or churches. The bridges were also beautiful landmarks. This day was filled with lovely natural paths that I enjoyed walking. I especially enjoyed seeing the village in the distance and knowing that I would be there soon to enjoy refreshments and relaxation a little bit. On my way to Estella, I spot a village in the distance, Zurich, a quaint hilltop village with winding, narrow roads and balconies with magenta flowers. The roads had great views, but they weren't always easy. The ones by the highways were my least favorite. But then we get back into the countryside and I enjoyed walking through the vineyards and the beautiful paths again, seeing nature, beautiful flowers. It was a mix. The next village I walked into was also just as beautiful and quaint, Lorca. That's where I decided to spend the night. And ironically, in this room, my roommates were the family that I had met the night before at the place where there wasn't room for me. So nice to have English-speaking company. We walked together that day through the towns and villages on our way to Estella. I loved that you never knew what you were going to expect to see that day. Estella seemed like a vibrant small town with lots to do, considering the population's only 14,000. Here I am on the steps to Iglesia San Pedro. Then back walking through the village, making our way to the Arachi wine fountain, my personal favorite. I've been looking forward to this refreshing moment. My two favorites, vino and water, and I did share it with my new friend Noah. He's a minor, but don't worry, he didn't drink that much. Then we stopped in the church and the wine museum. They seemed to go well together, and we're right across from each other. And back on the road, making our way through the tunnels, through the nice paths, well marked, and beautiful scenery to the next town. I see it in the distance. I continue to walk upward up the steep hill. Escuetta is the name of the village. A beautiful, quaint village. In fact, I meet a friend, Bibi, and she convinces me to stay, even though I wasn't that tired I could have walked on. Bebe was a writer from New Jersey, so we spoke a while and shared information, and we ran into each other later in our journey. So getting a late start, having woken up late, I'm back on the road again, and I ran into Hans, who stayed at the same albergue, only he left early that morning. So we walked together for a little while and enjoyed the sights, and he spoke very good English. And I always like to stop and take pictures, so we get to Los Arcos, and he went on, and I met some new friends. Got to share a birthday with Louise. She was celebrating her birthday, and I'm celebrating just having a nice peasant lunch. I enjoyed that lazy afternoon in Los Arcos Center. And then back on the road, having like a 3-hour lunch late in the afternoon, walking across to the next village and finding that we wanted to stay here, but there was no room. So we continued on to Toros De Rio. So we stayed at this place, and ironically, I met up again with Hans here. So on the road the next day with Louise and Nikki, passing through so early that the bars aren't even open yet. So I enjoyed walking with Louise and Nikki. They were two younger girls in their 30s from England, so they spoke English, proper English. It was really enjoyable, and we continued on for about a week together. So now we're walking through Vienna, and I get a taste of Nikki's favorite ice cream, the pink Magnum. Dark chocolate, raspberry, it soon became my favorite as well. So after our ice cream break, we headed on towards Legronio, and this nice graffiti art directing the way. It's just one of the ways that people show their creativity to mark the trails. So still walking with Louise and Nikki, we spot Legronio in the distance and get excited and walk towards it. And it's lovely, beautiful flowers and gardens. And as we get more into the city, you can see there's an entry with these tall cypress trees, and we see the storks, which you always see at the bell towers of churches, where anything that's high. So still walking into Legronio, you see the official Camino de Santiago flower, the rose. It's beautiful. So we're still walking through Legronio. Luis is ahead of me, and we're looking for a place to stay for the night. So we come across this albergue, and this is where I say goodbye to Luis and Nikki. They go back to England, and I continue on my journey. Through more churches and more markings. Getting out of the city the next day on my own was a challenge, and luckily I found my way, and meeting people as I walked out of the city through these cypress trees, and again back into nature. Over the water, crossing over the bridge, and I stop at this spot with a lovely view and have my potato and egg Spanish omelet breakfast, which I enjoy before I move on and walk solo again. Through more vineyards, more flowers, more beauty, solitude. I see a village in the distance, and as I enter it, I see old remains of Hospital de San Juan de Acre, and I meet a new friend. So I'm walking into the village of Navarrete, found a bar to take a break, and the tractor came through, and I met the party pilgrims, one of whom we call affectionately Party Pilgrim Kate, who I also met up with later on in the trip. And I also met some other women, one whose name was Esther, and we had such a great time that night, having dinner and then going to the Pilgrim's Mass. And the Pilgrim's Mass is at this beautiful golden church that was lit up And then afterwards the priest showed us some relics that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. It was amazing. So this is where we stayed in the hostel, and ironically again the same family from America was sharing my room with me. So here's a view from the roof where I was doing my laundry. I passed through Najera and then go on to Santo Domingo de Calzada. So this city is a little bit larger, and we found a municipal to stay in that serves us refreshments, some pepperoni sandwiches and wine. Here I am taking a swig of it. I also thought it was unusual in vending machines to see things like olives and pasta. Anyway, I met a woman named Sue, about my age, and together we toured the area and we went to the famous bell tower and church. So here's a view from the bell tower, and we toured it the same day some school kids were, so we had to share it with them. And then we went into the church. And the church has a story it's famous for. It's called The Miracle of the Hens. And according to the legend, a young German man and his family were traveling on pilgrimage to Santiago, and on the way they stopped to stay at Santo Domingo de Calzada for the night. When he rejected the innkeeper's daughter's advances, the young woman hid a silver cup in his pack, and he would be accused later of theft and be condemned to death by hanging. And on their return from Santiago, his parents went to their son and found him still alive, thanks to the intervention of St. Dominic, who protects pilgrims, and knew of his innocence. Surprised at such a miracle, the parents went to authorities to let them know. The sheriff, being skeptical, replied, "The son would be as alive as the roasted hen he was about to eat that very moment." As he pronounced those very words, the cockling hen instantly got up on the plate, the white feathers started to grow back, and he started to sing. So now Santo Domingo de Calzada is known for the miracle of the hen that sang after being roasted. Sue had never read Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, and since I was carrying a copy of it, I decided to hand it over to her and make my pack a little lighter. He walked the Camino years ago and was inspired to write this book. He even has a place along the Camino now. I decided I needed a rest, so I took the bus to the next city, Burgos. Burgos is a large city, but the Camino is not that large because I ran into my American family again at the bus depot. Unfortunately, they weren't doing too well. They were taking the train and skipping ahead to Lyon because the father had blisters really bad and couldn't walk, and they had to give it up. But on the bus, I met a new friend about my son's age, a young German man, and we toured the large Burgos Cathedral together. All the beautiful art and sculptures and architecture, everything was so beautiful. There were so many things I wanted to take pictures of to remember. So there is a lot of this just so I can see it and remember it. So many different chapels and altars and rooms dedicated to different saints and apostles. I was surprised to see how many were dedicated to the Virgin Mary. This altar has Santiago in the center of it. And here's the outside of the building. This is where I slept, my albergue, and the view from my window, and the octopus salad that was quite delicious. The streets are still narrow and built up. There are more people in this city, but during siesta time, you won't see anybody around. The village squares are empty until after about 7. Then it's so crowded you'd wonder where all those people came from. So while I was waiting for the restaurants to open, I went sightseeing. Of course, the castle was closed, but I did get to see the fabulous view of the cathedral again. The next morning I got up early. I stopped at the monastery, but it was closed. But I did feel the good energy. Unfortunately, after coming out of there, I got confused and went the wrong way. Finally got back on track, walking through a park, and found the signs again. Going through the construction zone was not too pleasant, and it was very hot outside, but the poppies made up for it. Now I'm walking through the small town of Tarjajos and into another small town where I see a shepherd with his flock crossing the road, and I'm walking into Reve de las Calzadas. I immediately liked this town. It was quaint and beautiful. They had a section with roses and a cute little town bell tower with a church. And as I turned the corner, I saw this woman lying on a bench in front of an albergue, waiting for it to open. She convinced me to stay. I really enjoyed her. Her name is Kiki, and she's one of my friends I'm still in touch with. We had a lot of neat people staying at that albergue that night. We had a lot of fun. Instead of the Pilgrim's Mass, the nuns had a special prayer meeting for us, few pilgrims who were there, and they were so sweet. They gave us each miraculous medals. Then I met the Irish, a mother and son and her friend. Early the next morning, I was leaving Valde de Las Calzadas with my new friend Kiki. We were on the road again, looking for signs, enjoying the sunrise and the poppies and each other. As we walk, I remember the blessing, the pilgrim's blessing, the nuns said to us last night. Almighty God, give your mercy on those who love you and never be far from those who seek you. Help these pilgrims who start the road to Santiago and lead them according to your will. May your protector's shadow cover them during the day, and may the light of your grace enlighten them at night, so that they may be able to arrive happily in your company, to kneel before the shrine of the Apostle of St. James, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Kiki and I caught up with the English people, and we all decided to stay at the ruins of San Anton. We had beds at least, but no electricity, so we did have to take cold showers. But it was really an interesting experience. We dined in candlelight, and I found statues of St. Anthony. Instead of being awoken by monks singing like I had hoped to be, I was awakened to this song. You know, the one that goes, always look on the bright side of life. Da-da, 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 da-da. Always look on the light side of life. Da-da, 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 da-da. 'Cause I can't whistle. Kiki and I had that song in our head, and every once in a while we'd break into that tune. Always look on the bright side of life. Doo-doot, 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 doo-doot. So we're in Itero de la Vega, where we stay for the night. We always try to find a room with a garden. And here's the church in that village. And they even have fountains that you have to pump yourself. Here we are, seeing the sights. There's a horse along the way. Kiki called these cigar flowers. This is a nice sign. And I can't go wrong with these double arrow signs. And I like these positive, negative angel sculptures that we saw on our way out of town. Found a sign that's magenta, matches my pack. It was really hot that day and we had walked a long way, so we decided to stay for the night at Poblacion de Campos. The hostess there made us a beautiful paella, and we enjoyed a special drink as we toasted to the Camino. The next morning, Kiki and I started so we saw the sunrise on the trail. It was beautiful, and it was cooler, and it was very peaceful. Then we stopped at a place and had a coffee. We saw this convent on the hill and thought it would be a good place to fill up our water bottles. And then we saw this sign, Sin Guarantee Sanitaria. Sin, doesn't that mean not? So we filled up our water bottles with water that wasn't guaranteed to be sanitary. So here's another church. We're walking to the village of Villafranca de Astorga. It's a Templar church, Santa Maria la Blanca. And this is a panel depicting the life of St. James, martyrdom, and his transference to Glacia. This is on the side of a bathroom. Here we are on our way to Carion. Only 463 kilometers left to Santiago. I always enjoy seeing the beautiful horses. Now we're walking into Carian De Los Condos. We stayed at a convent, Santa Clara, for the night. There's the outside of the convent. There's Kiki pointing to an artifact, and the Pilgrim statue in the center of town. It's got a lot of Templar history. And this is the church, Santa Maria Church. Carian de los Condos is a lovely city, a little larger. Unfortunately, I was having stomach issues due to either the water, Sin Guarantee Sanitario, or the stuffed peppers I ate at this restaurant. And this lovely French girl we met a couple days ago in our albergue had walked something ridiculous, like 30 miles in one day, where it took us 2 days to walk, and she was suffering injuries and had to slow down. Starting out on the old Roman road, the Via Aquitana that connected to Astorga, we continued on the long, hot meseta. There were no villages in between, so we were thrilled when we saw an albergue with a swimming pool. Kiki loved the hammock. It was like an oasis in the middle of the desert. Kiki and I separated for a while since I had to be in Lyon in a couple days for my birthday, but on her way out she handed me a little package and said, "This is for your birthday." Walking through the Meseta was really hard on me, and now I was alone. I missed Kiki. I met another girl, Robin, from the US, and we made it to Shaogun, which is the official center point for the Camino. These arches represent that. Robin and I wondered why they took us the long way around instead of the shortcut. They wanted us to see those arches. This was our municipal albergue we stayed at that night, €5. They range anywhere from 5 to 15 euros average. It was a long, hot day, and Robin was suffering from really bad blisters. She could barely walk. This is the building where we could have gotten a nice letter stating that we had made it halfway, but it was closed, so we skipped that and went to the train station. And we met these cute little men, and we were enjoying the train ride together into Lyon. Here I am in Lyon, finally, the day before my birthday, enjoying ice cream and the city. I loved this city. It was like a mini Manhattan to me. It had a huge, beautiful cathedral and just lots to do. This is the courtyard across from the municipal we stayed in for €5 that night. I woke up and then today was my birthday, June 5th, so I celebrated by having orange juice, my favorite, Zumo de Oronjo, with Robin and another new friend from the US. So now that it was my birthday, number 56, I was on my way to a birthday treat, the Parador, a really nice hotel with a bidet, a real bed with a canopy. I was thrilled. I could have my privacy, finally didn't have to share a room with other people snoring or share a bathroom. It was a beautiful hotel with lots of history. It was an old monastery converted, so they had the cloisters right downstairs I could tour. It was really amazing. I even had a little gift to open from Kiki. It was lovely, the bracelet I always wanted with the Camino shells on it. And in my favorite color, of course, magenta. And it felt really good to get cleaned up properly. So the hardest part was finding a salad with Romana lettuce, believe it or not, with the miscommunication. I found this lovely garden and even had my birth date on it. And my birthday sunset was beautiful, all my favorite colors. So the next morning I went to tour the Cathedral of Lyon, known for its beautiful glass, before I left, and I got a surprise text from Kiki saying she was on her way. So I met up with her after. So this is truly the magnificent stained glass that it's famous for in the Cathedral of Lyon. Then I toured the cloisters that were right next door. They were similar to the ones I saw at the Parador, but still magnificent and unusual. I walked back to the Parador, and Kiki met me in our hotel lobby. Just in time, I had to check out, and then we explored the rest of the city together. It was so wonderful having her to share Lyon with, my favorite city, and I decided to stay another day with her. So I went back to the municipal and spent another night with Kiki and my other friends that I just met. It was a continuation of my birthday celebration. There was even a festival going on. It was the day before a religious holy day, so the band was out practicing, and Kiki even went to Mass with me that day in the church, and they had the monstrous out. Kiki decided to stay a couple days and take Spanish lessons from a girl who lived there, and so she stayed with her for a couple days. We caught up later. Robin stayed on to heal her feet. She still couldn't walk, and her husband was coming to meet her soon, so I don't know whether they walked or bused to Santiago. So the next day I'm on the road again, but I meet another English-speaking friend. She's from Australia. A little confusing here, which road to go? So as Kelly and I approach the next village, we hear these boom, blow-up things. We thought they were bombing or something, but it was just their way of celebrating, including the bagpipes and the statues. Kelly and I rested here for a little while, and she decided to go on. But it was hot, and I enjoyed this quaint little village, so I decided to stay. So I went to the Albergue de Jesus, and I met some monastery students there. This albergue had funky vibes. All of the walls had writing and paintings and drawings on them by pilgrims who had stayed there. And outside there were these funky boot planters. The first man I met was Jack from Ireland. At least that's what he told me. He is a character. He's Jack from Ireland because of the movie The Way. During our dinner, he's trying to feed me his whipped cream. One of the best things about that albergue was that I only shared a room with one other woman. Her name was Leo from Germany, and she spoke a little English, so we became friends. And since our albergue was entertaining all the local people that night because of the holy day, we didn't get any meal, so we all decided to walk across the street to the other albergue where they prepared for us a nice meal last minute, but we enjoyed it together. Apparently our albergue was the party place and they were entertaining, so it was a little hard to sleep that night. They like these disco parties and they don't start till after 10:30 because that's when the sun sets. So now I'm on the road with Leo, and she's very fair complected, but we're both really hot and tired. It's 98 degrees. And we decide to stop at the second town just outside of Hospital de Orbigo named Santa Beneze de Valde Glacia. Small town with a long name. There wasn't much to this town, but we managed to find the church and the exercise workout area right across from it. I remember going to Mass there that evening, and the priest was sick. He kept coughing and wiping his runny nose on his sleeve. He ended Mass early and shut it down, turned off the lights. It's interesting, you're walking in these long paths of nobody around, and then you come across this oasis in the middle of the desert. This man actually lives there in this bed, and he offers these things free of charge to pilgrims for donation only. Here's the cross of Saint Turbio, who lived in 5 AD. He was the bishop of Astorga, and he was banished from the city. So at this point, he fell to his knees and had one last look at his city. It was hot, and this would have been a good place to fill our water bottles, but it was not drinkable. We walked through this green maze on our way into Astorga. In Astorga, we stayed at a municipal, and I spot this beautiful bougainvillea planter. And another pilgrim statue is right outside. There's a church right across. It has a lot of history. And right next to the church, outside, were some Roman ruins from 1 BC, and there were some of the original mosaics that survived of bears and birds. Astorga is also known for their chocolate, so there was a chocolate museum. We walked through a market where I buy my bag that I carry on my back when I'm not carrying my heavy pack. At Plaza Mayor Square in the center of Astorga, there's a Baroque city hall, and its animated clock was built by a watchmaker, Bartolomeu Fernandez, in the end of the 18th century. There's a lot to see here in Astorga, so Leo and I stopped walking early today so we could tour the cathedral and the castle. We started with a tour of the Cathedral of Santa Maria de Astorga, which is a mix of Baroque, Gothic, and Renaissance. There are so many amazing details in this church. I had to take so many pictures because they're so beautiful. The museum was equally as interesting, with beautiful artifacts from the masses. The robes that they wore, the cardinals' hats, the manuscripts, all the different Bibles. It too was amazing, so I'll go through these pictures pretty quickly since there are many of them. I also enjoyed the collection of all the different Madonnas. I had no idea there were so many different variations. The castle, or Palacio Episcopal de Astorga, was designed by Antonio Gaudi, and the previous episcopal palace had burned down, so Gaudi accepted the commission to rebuild it if he could do it in his style. He wanted to use granite and slate, neo-Gothic structure with round turrets, swooping buttresses, and triplets of narrow windows. However, it was never used for the purpose it was intended, which is the bishop's residence. In fact, even though Gaudi designed it in 1887, because of creative and financial differences, they had another architect complete it, and all of Gaudi's ideas were just in his head, so they never had anything drawn out. These three angels on the outside were designed by Gaudi, and they were intended for the inside originally. We had reservations about walking from Astorga to Rabanel. For one thing, it was pouring rain, and we thought maybe we'd get struck by lightnings because we're carrying poles. The other thing is that's where the girl went missing on the trail from Arizona. So a group of women decided to band together, and we made it through the storm, literally. We made it! And here's the group. Esther, who I met back in Navarrete, and Leo and I, who are walking together, and another German lady. I was soaked all the way through, happy to find an albergue to stay. Later that evening, the monks had a ceremony where they chanted the blessing for us. The next morning, the air was fresh, it wasn't raining. It was a nice journey up the hill to Cruz de Ferro. And I saw the pilgrim who had his donkey with him. Further up the road, I saw a horse coming towards me, a beautiful horse, wild. And this pilgrim had a mission to save the animals. Going up the steep hill to Cruz de Ferro, I meet Stacy from Australia, and we hike up the hill together. She's a photographer, so we photograph each other. And here she's photographed me giving my stone up. I pause for a moment to reconnect with the purpose of my journey, and I add the token of love to the huge pile. Lots of ups and downs in this picturesque area, going through Manharin to Acebo. That red line through the sign Manharin means we're now leaving. When we enter, there's no red line through it. Only 220 Ks left. Ks are shorter than miles, so that sounds good. Still going through this beautiful country of ups and downs. Good thing it's so beautiful because it takes your mind off how difficult the walk really is. Not only is it very steep, but the rocks are really hard to walk on and they hurt your feet after long days. So now going into the village and resting for a while, I meet the Camino baby. Even though she's being carried, she liked my poles. So we decide to stay in Acebo where there's a nice view and I can relax and enjoy it for a while. Early the next morning, back on the road, walking to Malineska, another quaint village with beautiful views. It's early, so I'm just passing through and decide to have a little breakfast here so I can enjoy the views while I rest. But nothing's open except one smart grocery store, a small one, that I buy some yogurt. Then I head out back on the road right next to the highway, see the Shell station, and now I'm in Panparata. I'm on my own now, and I chose to stay at a municipal, but it wasn't open yet, so I had to line up my backpacks in the order we came. There's the chapel, and where I did my laundry. In the town square, I met Pastor Roy from America and a Canadian woman, Karen, and we toured the Templar Castle together. It was amazing how such an ancient medieval castle and artifacts still remain. They were even selling hunks of prosciutto in the grocery store. On my way out, I see unique signs marking the way, a small church, and a walk through the town of Colombrianos. I spot another stork's nest high up. Walking into the village of Campanaraya, where they're famous for their wine. Lots of wine country I'll be walking through. I'm excited. And certainly I've been drinking my fill of it because it is cheaper than water. Right before I saw this arrow, I met a woman wanting money and to sign something that I didn't really understand. And later on, the farmer warned me about her, so I'm glad I didn't give her anything. In Cacabellos, this is a small museum I toured. Beautiful things. Here's the town of Cacabellos, where I had a glass of wine with my new friends, my Portuguese friends, which I met in Panparata touring the Templar Castle. A small quaint church here. I considered staying here overnight, but it was still early in the day, so I carried on to Villafranca. About an hour outside off the highway, I saw this little place to have a bite to eat, and these are my Portuguese friends. And afterwards we carried on through the vineyards. It was the most beautiful day, and I was in my glory because they were also picking cherries, and they approached me and asked me, "Do you want some cherries?" Fresh cherries, fresh grapes, and good wine, and a lot of beauty. What more could I want? This inspirational sculpture says, "Look, listen, love, dream, and smile." It was very beautiful, but all the ups and downs was starting to affect my knee. Walking into Villafranca del Bierzo, there's a 12th century Church of Santiago. It has its north entrance door of forgiveness, Puente del Perdón. Medieval pilgrims that were unable to continue to Santiago received absolution here, the same as they would in Santiago. It's sometimes referred to as Little Santiago. This is a part-time home of the Marquis of Villafranca. It looks like a small castle. This is the town center, or Plaza Mayor, where we spent a lot of time. I ran into some old pilgrim friends, including Party Pilgrim Kate and Pastor Roy, some American friends, and we hung out here. It was raining, so we drank sangria and sang the Altrea song. It was lots of fun. Utrea, Utrea, Jesusea, Deus adjuvaneus, Deus adjuvaneus. Here's a facade of the 17th century Glacia San Nicolas, where I stayed. And for only €3 extra, I got a semi-private room that I shared with 2 other women, with a private bathroom and a bidet and a shower to ourselves in a great location. It was worth the €8 I spent. And there was some kind of St. Anthony festival going on. That's why it had all the tables and shopping and food. I debated in the morning whether I should walk or not, or just stay another day with these American pilgrims I met, because it did look like rain, but it ended up being a beautiful day. I'm glad I walked. I passed through a small village of Trobadello, not much going on, so I kept walking. Then on to La Portella, and this was a cute little town. I stayed and had something to eat, and that's where I met Melissa. Melissa was one of Kate's Party Pilgrim friends, and she didn't have anybody to walk with. She was trying to catch up with me, so we walked together. And spent the night in Vega de Valcarce, and that was really a fun night because there were 4 of us women, and we had a long talk. There was not much else to do there. The next day we thought it would be fun to take the horses up the steep hill and give our bodies a little rest. Now at the top, you can tell it's really cold. I'm wearing all the clothes I have with me. Here in the village of Brio, we enjoyed the delicious garlic soup that warmed us up. This pre-Romanesque church is the oldest church on the Camino, Santa Maria la Real. It's known for its miracle. A humble peasant braved a fierce snowstorm to attend Mass and saw the bread and wine turn into the body and blood of Christ. These are the stained linens. And here's a typical Galician stone hut that appears in this quaint village. You see the beautiful view. It's really cold. I have all my clothes on there. Now we're leaving Brio and walking on. It's chilly at first, and then it warms up later. We meet another statue and an Italian biker who takes our photos. The markers out of flowers is amazing, and so is the countryside. Gorgeous. Melissa and I spent the night in Hospital de la Condesa. It had beautiful views, and it was like being in the country because you'd see things like chickens and cows walking around the streets, and they were just out there. We ate dinner at the cozy restaurant in town, and this is what I ordered. Fish came with all the heads and everything. Dessert was cheese with honey, their version of cheesecake. We started out early the next morning on our way to Sarria. We could see the mist from the morning fog. Now walking through Sarria, I was a little bit disappointed. There wasn't as much as I thought there would be. There's a monastery, and there's a church, and that was about it for the highlights, so I decided not to stay there like I had originally planned, and I just walked through instead. The important thing about Sarria is that it represents the last 100 kilometers to Santiago. About 5 or 6 days if you're walking normally. This man had an unusual way of carrying his belongings. I love these beautiful magenta flowers. In this Romanesque church is Iglesia de Santiago, a statue of St. James. Melissa and I stopped briefly at a place to eat on the way and met a new friend, Kathy, from Portland, Oregon. So now all three of us are walking the way to the next village. We saw this beautiful horse and Melissa fed it a piece of her fruit. We saw a lot of these beautiful cows. A funny, abstract-looking pilgrim that we started seeing in this region. These big beanstalk-looking plants. Sometimes we had to cross over water and other times walk on cobblestone, which were really difficult. The official 100 kilometers left to Santiago markers. Now staying in Moorgrade for the night, Pastor Roy shows up in our room. I enjoy a nice carrot apple ginger drink. Enjoying more of the beautiful flowers and scenery, and you never know what kind of friends are going to pop up next. Beautiful animals, and you never know who's going to share the trail with you either. So walking up into Puerto Marin, we actually had to cross over a bridge and then walk up over the stairs onto the other side. This is the view. And this is a church in Puerto Marin. Now there are three of us walking the way. The good thing was there was a lot more shade walking the last part to Santiago. Here are some more desserts we ate. There's Kathy eating a nice big ice cream sundae. She loved ice cream. A selfie of Kathy and I. An unusual vending machine. More cows on the road. At this resting spot, they asked us where we were from. So Kathy wrote in all of our states, Oregon, Arizona, and Florida, and we were the only ones from the U.S. that day. Places to rest and get refreshed and reunite with pilgrims. These giant ant statues were a change from the pilgrim statues we usually saw. Kathy and I stayed at this place in Palos de Rey while Melissa joined her friends. Still following the markers, mostly yellow arrows, but sometimes they change from city to city. And I thought this was neat that the bread truck came to these small villages, and here's a lady picking out her loaf. This farm lady walking down the road was very adamant about not having her picture taken, and she was, after all, carrying a pitchfork, so I took it from behind. Abandoned booths just left on the trail marker. Here's another ancient road we walked on. Here's another church. I've seen a lot of these on the trail. And I love seeing all of them. Each of them are unique, and yet I've seen so many of them, I get confused. This motivational sign says, "Be the change." Unfortunately, people wrote graffiti over it. Another unpretentious looking church. Kathy and I stayed for a night in Malide, where we met a new roommate, Marianne, from California. So for dinner we had these croquettes and spaghetti carbonara. Then Marianne and I went to the Mass that night at another church. This church had some unusual statues, and it had a room devoted to Our Lady of Fatima. And you see the picture of Mother Teresa on the wall as well. So the next morning, the three of us, Kathy, Marianne, and I, are setting out to the next village. We stopped briefly to do a little shopping at the 50-kilometer store. So I stopped to look at this church along the way, and I run into Kiki. What a nice surprise. So we walked along together and left Marianne and Kathy so we could talk and catch up on things. When we stopped to eat breakfast, we had a nice long breakfast, and Marianne and Kathy caught up with us. Here's a sign advertising some real estate available in this area, and these would need some work, but there's certainly potential. After we ate, He went on, and I stayed with Marianne and Kathy, and we walked a little slower, but we all arrived at the same albergue that night in Ribadiso. I thought this church was interesting because it had Santiago in the center. It was all about Saint Santiago. So here we are, Marianne and Kathy and I walking along the way. We had passed a lot of these little houses. They looked like doll houses or something. But looking inside closer, this one looks like it has corn inside. There's a lot of these in Spain. So walking into Ribadiso, we found a lovely albergue right near the river, and this is our room with a view. Kiki was already there, and some of our other friends were there as well, and we had a nice dinner. But this chicken kept bugging us for food, like a dog. Speaking about the dogs in Spain, they were not ferocious, they were beautiful. This is the boy carrying the cross, and I helped him. Noticing more unique signs along the way, I crossed over another bridge and stopped for a late breakfast, or to eat my pilgrim's foot that I've been wanting to do. We saw more free-range, beautiful cows along the way, and then we walked by this bar. It has all these bottles lined up on the ledge. Walking through, seeing more discoveries of nature and beautiful flowers. These magenta ones were really unique, and so I took a few pictures of them. I really like them. So we stayed in the next city, Salceda, which was really beautiful. And they had really good food. This man who owned it was like a gourmet chef. I loved the squid. So it was a nice place to relax after a long, hot day's walking. And I love these flowers. I saw so many of them, and Kathy taught me they change color due to the ripeness. Haven't seen cigarette machines in a long time, and they're all over Spain. Many people seem to smoke there. Now we're counting down 18 kilometers left. Walking through the beautiful forest, nice and shady on a hot afternoon. It's really appreciated. This yellow arrow says imagine. And there's some sheep resting. Walking under a bridge. And walking under this old tree's roots. Here's a selfie of the three of us and some unusual signs we saw along the way. This one tells us we're almost there, 12.5 kilometers left. And we approach the Santiago sign now, so we're really close. We saw a lot of crosses on the fence and walked through more shaded woody areas. Lots of different markers. There's one of those houses again. It looks like a little church this time. 2 horse pilgrims check out this church near Lavacola. We decide to share a room in a hotel in Lavacola, which isn't too far, but one of the pilgrims' rituals is to prepare ourselves for Santiago, which we'll walk into early tomorrow. So our dinner was a typical pilgrim's meal, ensalada mixta. I chose chicken for my meat with potatoes, always french fries, and unlimited supply of wine. I have the whole bottle there. Love the shell arrow, but sometimes they're not very clear. And other times there's no way you could miss it. So all cleaned up and ready to arrive in Santiago, just like arriving to see the Wizard of Oz, we arrive at Mount Joy, or Monte de Gozo. Today it's a monument commemorating the visit of Pope John Paul II. At the bottom of the hill, there's a little stand to get refreshments and another church that we visited. This was a yard with some unusual stone sculptures we passed by. Now it's getting exciting because we can see Santiago in the distance. We see the view of Santiago as we walk into it and crossing this wooden bridge that looked pretty questionable. But we made it into the modern city suburbs of Santiago and see the prominent monument to notable historical figures connected with the Camino. There's Pope John Paul. This whole area is called Plaza da Concordia. And since you can no longer put your hand in the cathedral when you enter, I did it here. I did a little window shopping. Walking towards the cathedral, the Altrea song runs through my head. Tu le montanu prano le sarman, tu le montanu solo pluvois, zula pre zula ru nous appela, c'est la ville de Compostelle. Utrea, Utrea, Jesus ea, Deus adjuvenus. We made it! Here's Kathy and I in front of the being renovated cathedral. But the inside is beautiful, golden. After attending the Pilgrim's Mass, we waited in line to get our Compostela, and we proudly display each of ours with our Latin names on them. It's a beautiful document I'm going to frame when I get home. To celebrate, we had a pilgrim's lunch at the restaurant across from our albergue. There's the gyros. Santiago cakes that they're known for. This is our albergue where we stayed, the last stamp. We turned the corner and saw this guy. He looked like he was floating. We arrived the day before the Feast of St. John's, Holy Day. And so they were celebrating that evening these bonfires. The kids would jump over and they had bands and they were just partying all night. The next day, Kathy wasn't feeling well, so while she slept in the room, I went to the Pilgrim's Mass for the Holy Day and saw the special Bada Fumerio swing. And now that I have my Compostela, I'm able to sit in the reserved seating for pilgrims right up front. I really enjoyed seeing the Bada Fumerio swing. It was very entertaining. And there's a story behind it. Actually, it was done to defumigate the pilgrims because after their long journey and not being as clean as they would like to be, they swung those incense in a massive amount to fumigate and make them smell better. So that's why they do it. Now they only do it on Friday evenings and holy days.
Muchas gracias por su oración, su silencio.
So since it was the holy day, the Feast of St. John, I got to see it swing. So I feel very happy that in the few days I was there, I actually got to see that. So the church was really large, and there were a lot of little areas within the church that we could look at, including going behind the altar and hugging the statue of St. James. However, they wouldn't let us take photos there. This was on the way going in, all the angels that were on the ceiling, their beautiful cherubs. And going downstairs underground beneath the statue is where the St. James or Santiago remains are. It's a little bit far away, but this is a close-up of it. It shows you where the remains are kept. And that was the whole purpose of our journey, is to kneel before the remains of St. James. And then here's Santiago, the statue. Now leaving Santiago the next day, we took a bus and rode it into the beautiful seaside coast of Finisterre, or Fisteri as some call it, the end of the world. It's a beautiful fishing village with a lot of history and a lot of beauty. There are those flowers I love again. This Fisherman's Museum was right around the corner from where we stayed, and this guy who gave us the tour, he was an old fisherman. He was such a character. He taught us a lot about the fishing industry. And here's the beach right nearby where we found a lot of seashells. And there's the town. Oh, they had the best calamari and dessert for their pilgrim's menu, and a beautiful view. There's the town and a few shops and a silly looking pilgrim statue. This guy was traveling with his donkey, a pilgrim, and more of the countryside and the views. It's called the end of the world because until the discovery of the Americas, Finisterre or Fistere was the last outpost of the known world. They thought the world ended with the horizon, with the sun going down. And the sun doesn't set until 10:30 or 11 up here, so we're on our way up the hill to the lighthouse, and it is a tradition to burn some clothes or boots or anything that accompanied the pilgrim on their pilgrimage as a symbol of renovation or rebirth. Since I'd walked my boots over 500 miles, they were pretty worn out, so I gave them up for rebirth. I didn't want to burn them, but they've had their time. Here I am saying goodbye. They served me well. I made it with no blisters. It's a miracle. Here I am at the top of the hill by the lighthouse at the 0-kilometer marker, the official end of the Camino. It was fun shopping on the Saturday at the market they had, and they loved their discos. Some fun signs and places to eat, get ice cream. These peaches were unusual looking but delicious. Some of the beautiful beaches where we enjoyed finding rocks and glass and shells. It was really fun. And the marina is a beautiful little town. We found the place to stay because this woman came to meet us at the bus advertising her albergue, and it was just her home that she had converted. It looked like an antique house, like a grandmother's house. So it was very comfortable, yet noisy because we were all sharing one bathroom. But it was a great location and we got to walk everywhere, and it was only 10 euros a night. So we stayed there a couple of nights. It looks like paradise, and there were several beautiful beaches like this that weren't very populated, mostly just the pilgrims that had hiked. And here we found fabulous shells that represented the Camino shell, so I brought some home. I could have brought a lot more home, but I didn't have room. I loved this quaint, beautiful town by the ocean with the fresh air. There's one of those little houses again, and there's a donkey waiting for his master outside the market. More beautiful views and little beaches that we found. Kathy and I found a couple beaches where we collected beautiful beach glass. I had never seen that before, so I brought a bunch home, blues and greens and aquas. We sadly said goodbye to Finisterre as we watched the sunset that evening and boarded a bus the next afternoon to Mucia, another quaint coastal city. So this one has a beautiful marina as well and delicious calamari. This unusual flower was growing underwater. The sign is for the dogs, but unfortunately in Spain the dogs go wherever they want. Walking up Mucia's far north coast, Costa del Morte, or the Coast of Death, because of the large number of shipwrecks along the rocky shore. We first passed the Church of Santa Maria, which is the Church of the Fisherman. And here you see all the graves. Further down the hill is the famous Church on the Rocks, Sanctuario de Virxe de Barca. It was originally a pre-Christian Celtic shrine and sacred spot. This part of Spain was resistant to conversion of Christianity and was only converted in the 12th century. Unfortunately, on December 25th of 2013, it was destroyed by fire caused by lightning. This is the interior now. They're having the altar redone and they're renovating. Notice the angels holding the boats. These were the rocks that in the film The Way, Martin Sheen spread his ashes of his son. It's Mucia, not Finisterre like in the movie. It's a little video. Three stones are pretty famous. Legend has it that St. James was trying to Christianize the locals and was discouraged and so the Virgin Mary appeared to comfort him, and the Celtic stones near the church are now said to be remains of the Virgin Mary's boat. So this is the moving or the rocking rock. That tradition has it the secret to moving it is a pure heart. Here's the beautiful Mucia Lighthouse on the rocks. And on the other side is this monument to the Prestige oil spill in 2002 to remind people of the disaster. This is the doorway of the ancient sanctuary of Virxe de Barca. Mucia is known for its lace making, so these ladies are making lace. Kathy and I enjoyed watching these ladies, so we bought our little souvenirs with lace, and we thought they had such a spectacular view. We could both see ourselves living here, making lace, and looking at this beautiful view every day. On our way back to our albergue, we stopped at some shops, did a little shopping, and I bought a dress. Kathy bought some souvenirs. Love those grilled padron peppers. And this is on our way, our little beach near where we're staying. Those are the seashells that I collected. My pilgrim's meal included fresh fish and of course French fries and wine, an aerial view, and some last looks of the ocean of this part of the world. Another Camino marker, even here in Mucia, and a quaint little town center. Bread is so delicious here in Spain, and it's the staple of life. They even deliver it to your doors with your propane. Most people hang their laundry out to dry. They don't have dryers. And they air out their bedding in their windows. And I never got tired of those prosciutto sandwiches on that good bread. This is the albergue we stayed at, and downstairs was the disco. One night, Sunday night after everybody had left, the owner invited me down there for a drink, and it was amazing. Our last typical Camino breakfast, and I don't even like coffee, but I liked their coffee. There's photos of the lighthouse and the cathedral. Now walking back through Santiago, I see Magenta Art Studio, daffodils. I took a bus back to my hotel where I stayed in Santiago so I could catch my flight to Madrid. I enjoyed my last piece of Santiago cake after my last pilgrim's meal. I take the 6 a.m. bus to Santiago Airport and wait for my flight to Madrid to meet Kathy. She had taken the train the previous day, but she was meeting me at my hotel and we were sharing a room that night, so I was looking forward to spending time with her in Madrid. I had a window seat that I had to pay for, so I took pictures on my way to Madrid. My backpack is checked, and this is our hotel room in Madrid. Looking out the window, and our bidet as usual, the area around it, and we went to the famous museum, the Prado, where we saw the famous Picasso exhibit. Kathy and I took a cab downtown, and then we walked around afterwards, and it was really warm, so I got to try another variety of ice cream. It looked like a watermelon. This looks like a good outdoor misting system. Some beautiful buildings. This one looks like the Tower Pizza. I'm so happy to find my Design Gold dress shop and buy my birthday dress. I also found a pair of sandals Kathy helped me shop for, the lace-up Roman sandals. And then finally get to enjoy my sangria, and then afterwards ice cream. Back at the hotel because Kathy had to leave the next afternoon and I left the following really early morning. Here is a line in the Madrid airport even at 4:30 a.m. I flew Air Italia where they had the good snacks that go with the good wine. I had a layover in Rome, which was just enough to be a hassle. They got off and put us on these buses to get us over to the other gates, and got on another Air Italia flight to go into Kennedy Airport, and there's my wine snack. Camino pilgrims get their own passports. I had 3 of them, so they were filled with stamps of every place I stayed, and sometimes restaurants or wherever I stopped to tour, the churches. So I had remembrance from a lot of the places that I visited along the Camino. Five symbols of the Camino. One is the yellow arrow. The arrow shows us the Camino path. If it weren't for this, many times we wouldn't know where to go. Whenever we find it again, we are reassured that we are on the right track. How do we feel when we can't find the arrows? What a huge help that someone came before us to mark the way. Our life is like the Camino. Sometimes we feel lost and frustrated when we can't find the right way or signs to reassure us. 2. Our backpack. When we were at home, it didn't seem to matter what we put in it. Now that we have to carry it, we realize how much everything weighs and how much each thing counts. We also recognize how many things we can really do without. On the Camino of life, we all carry a backpack. Sometimes we add things, then we have to carry it, and finally reach the point where it's too much to carry. Bandage. Luckily, I didn't have any blisters. However, nobody is free from pain on the Camino. Sooner or later, our body pays the price, and we may have to take a slower pace or even stop. Strangely, the Camino wouldn't be the same without pain. Because of pain, we realize how difficult the Camino really is, and when we finish each day's walk, we become a different person from who we were when we started. Walking stick. Every pilgrim needs help to keep walking, especially when we've walked a long while. The Camino allows us the privilege of meeting true travel companions. I think about the special people on my journey that helped me on the Camino to encourage me when I wanted to give up. Their life story and the conversations with them inspired me as well. This is one of the many great life lessons that the Camino offers us. Scallop Shell. Years ago, every pilgrim who walked and reached Santiago received a special manuscript and a scallop shell to hang on his or her pack. This symbolized the changed life which he experienced as he walked on the Camino, and that he was now returning home as a different person. The shell, if you look at it from above, looks like a hand. This symbolizes the good works that Jesus did for humankind. Whoever wore the shell wanted to express publicly his desire to live by this lifestyle of serving and loving the rest of humanity.
Okay, so that was a little taste of what my Camino was like, based on what I had with me, which was just my iPhone. Normally I would carry my big camera, my lenses, because I'm very visually oriented and I love beauty and I saw so much beauty. But I wanted the pictures to be secondary because really the journey was about what I was living day to day. And of course I did want photos, which is why I took my iPhone, and I did take several photos, as you saw, several thousand photos, which I've edited here and to make this story. So anyway, that's a small taste of that. And a lot of people, since now I'm back into my life, my so-called real life, and I'm settling in again, a lot of people have asked me, what'd you learn? How have you changed? I don't know if they're expecting anything drastic or miraculous, but my answer is, well, yes, I've changed. I've had a life experience that I'll never forget. I lived out of a backpack for 6 weeks in a foreign country where I didn't speak the language, and it was wonderful. It was a new experience. It got me out of my routine and my comfort zone. So whenever you do that, I think that's what traveling is all about. You're truly living in the moment. Walking the Camino is like having 3 experiences in one. The first is mental. I was a tourist in Spain. It was my first time in Spain ever, and I got to see bigger cities like Pamplona and Lyon and Santiago, as well as the small villages that I walked through that I'll never forget. There was so much history to all those. I really enjoyed learning about what it used to be and thinking about the apostles and St. John actually walking through that same way. The second part of it is physical. It is a 500-mile through hike, and I'd never done that before. And carrying a backpack, that was new to me. So yes, there were challenges, and a lot of people unfortunately didn't take it seriously. I did train for it, and it was still difficult at times, but I kept persevering and I made it, thankfully without blisters. So that was the physical part of it, and then of course the spiritual aspect of it is very important to me. It's like a walking meditation on the Camino, because you really are alone most of the time, and I had lots of time to be alone with my thoughts. A lot of the people that I talked with while I was walking on the trail, most of them had major life decisions to make, and that was why they were walking. So this gave them the luxury of having time away from their normal life and distractions to be able to concentrate on them. The Camino is like life. You really have to learn to live in the moment, because there are unpredictable situations that come up, as well as unexpected pleasures that you want to enjoy. So I had that day-to-day living in the moment attitude while being on the Camino, and I want to take that into my normal life. On my Camino and in my life, I've learned to be brave, to have faith, and to go forward.